I'd like to call the order Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Monday, February 26, 2024. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you to everyone attending this evening and those who will be watching online. Just want to make a note that all board members are present. Student member Maya Farrow is excused. We will start with communications and community engagement for public comments. A reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you will be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? All right, we will move on to routine matters for approval. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 12th, 2024.
Moved by Murray.
Second by Fryer.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 12th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 12th, 2024. Ms. Heika.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, now we'll move on to the strategic plan business in the area of finance and operations. I need a motion to approve the 2023-2024 general fund budget amendment as included in attachment A.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Heike.
It's been moved and supported to approve the 23-24 general fund budget amendment as included in attachment A. As you recall, at the last meeting, Ms. Hendricks presented the amendment to us. We had time to ask her and Mr. Gearbaugh any questions. This is basically the second reading of this general fund budget amendment. Are there any further questions for Ms. Hendricks or Mr. Gearbaugh, or any comments in regards to the amendment? All right, hearing none, it's been moved and supported to approve the 2023-2024 general fund budget amendment as included in attachment A. Ms. Heika.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, next up in the area of personnel and leadership, we have a teacher appointment. I need a motion to approve Jessica Nadeau as the Simons Elementary School Behavior Specialist effective immediately.
Motion by Rosenleacher.
Support by Farrow.
So moved and supported to approve Jessica Nadeau as the Simons Elementary School Behavior Specialist effective immediately. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a couple of comments. We are excited to be able to hire a behavior specialist who has had her BCBA for over 11 years and has been working in the educational environment for the last 4 or 5 years. Just truly lucky to get someone with that level of experience. She's very excited to come to us from an intermediate school district. She enjoyed her work in the intermediate school district that she was in, but she was working in 3 or 4 different buildings, and is very excited to have a home in one building and be able to develop a true family. So we're excited to bring her aboard tonight with your approval.
And her salary will be set by the contract.
Yes.
Any questions or comments? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve Jessica Nadeau as the Simons Elementary School Behavior Specialist effective immediately. Ms. Heika.
Murray,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Motion carries 7-0.
All right, back to public comments. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? Student board comments, Mrs. Powell.
Okay. So I just want to start off by pointing out that on Friday, during the boys basketball game, 1948 boys basketball state champion Sherman Collins was welcomed back and honored, and I heard it was very meaningful and very special. The play is coming up March 15th through 17th, as well as the 22nd and 23rd. More information about the play and the times can be found on the MHS Performing Arts Instagram and Facebook. Reminder that all spring sport practices and tryouts begin on March 11th, and I believe tryouts go till the 13th. Girls basketball has a game on Tuesday, February 27th at home versus Adrian High School at 7 p.m. Thursday, February 29th versus Britton Deerfield High School at Britton Deerfield at 7. Boys basketball played tonight versus Airport for the MHSAA District Quarterfinals at Airport at 6. Bowling, Friday, March 1st, is the MHSAA Division III State Team event at Jack's 60 at 8:15 in the morning. Saturday, March 2nd, is the MHSAA Division III State Singles event at Jack's 60 at 8:15. Powerlifting is their last event is Saturday, March 9th for the MHS PLA State Meet at Lake Orion. The location is still supposed to be determined. That is at 9. Boys swimming has a meet Tuesday, February 27th for the SMISL diving at home. Time is to be determined. Saturday, March 2nd is the SMISL swimming at home at 12 p.m. Friday, March 8th is the MHSAA state prelims. Location is to be determined at 10 a.m. Saturday, March 9th is the MHSAA state finals. Location is to be determined at 10 a.m. Good luck to the finishing sports of the winter season, and I wish you best of luck for the upcoming spring sports.
All right, thank you, Ms. Powell. Assistant Superintendent comments, Mr. McMahon.
Benchmark achievement report, that was the COVID requirement that we had to give, that we no longer have to give for COVID.
You know, I'm sorry, I'm gonna,
You want to go to?
yeah, just so, because you won't be heard. Thank you.
I just passed out the COVID, the benchmark achievement report, the one that was required per COVID. It's no longer required under COVID rules, but we like the report, so we're going to keep doing it. It's essentially, for the audience, it's our NWA report, K-8, math and reading. That was the requirement. We just keep doing that. Our teachers and principals have done great work. We've met every goal in every area so far from the fall to the winter assessment. Seventh grade shows a little weakness there in a non-goal area, but just reports. But everything else is actually, they're doing really well, tremendously well. Double-digit growth, which is great. That will be posted on our transparency site this evening or tomorrow morning. I also want to provide a grant update. As usual, they're getting a little more busier this year. So the current update is that the consolidated application amendment has been submitted. We just had to readjust the budget. We got that in. Krista did most of the work for that, so thank you. Section 97J, I had to submit modifications, still trying to get approval on that. That's essentially diagnostic screener grant. We're going for a DESA assessment and a new software program where we can essentially like screen for early warning signs. I tried to squeeze in a 3-year deal, but they made me cut back to 1 year because they're not allowing us to pay for things in advance. So they used to do that, but they're cutting back on this one. So it's just a 1-year deal for next year. Hopefully it gets approved. Section 35J is the literacy professional development grant, and I'm going to pass out a plan. That's called the Targeted Literacy Plan. That's a requirement of the grant. That will also be posted on our website. It's possible that when they send that back to me for amendments, and if that's the case, I'll let you know and we'll update it as needed. I really want to make a point that Tanya Saragosa and Tracy Terrace were like a ton of help on this. If you recall, maybe last board meeting, I think I mentioned this one. It's the one that just got released like 4 weeks ago and was due, just last week. And it was a ton of work. Around the county, all the curriculum directors were getting together and working on it. We all came up with our plans, but Tanya and Tracy were a ton of help for me. And it was like last minute. They were working on the weekends and evenings, and I'm greatly appreciative of it. So this application is really just the first step. It's like to show who's interested, and then they'll figure out the amount per pupil that's coming in. I think I shared with you the original allocation that we were told, the estimated allocation was $360 per pupil, which was going to be significant for us, potentially $300,000. That's if everybody applied, it would only go up from there. And then the day before it was due, they came back and said, no, it's actually $209 per pupil. So they made a grave error. I shared that with someone from MDE who was sitting next to me in the meeting, and he couldn't believe it. And so, but there's sort of a lot of unknowns with that, but it's a good plan. It's a comprehensive plan. You'll see in there's goals. It connects to our benchmark assessment report, which you just received the update. It connects to our MyKit plan, which was connected to our 23G application, and then we created some early literacy PD goals. Essentially, what we're trying to do there is trying to get money to compensate our teachers to do some additional training. But those plans will come out when we get the money. Section 23G has been approved. We received those funds. That's a little over $200,000, and that's essentially going to cover 2 years of math intervention. Those are already in place. It's just going to back fund. And, we also received the benchmark assessment reimbursement grant, and that's been a number of years now, maybe 5 or 6 years, and we just get enough money to cover NWA. So the state pays for that, but we had to apply for it and qualify. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Any questions? All right, next up is superintendent comments. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Thank you. Just a few things to share this evening. First, an update on our middle school student who had the medical emergency at school, and I am giving this with permission from his parents. Gino has been at home now for over a week and is recovering and doing quite well. He may need some medical procedures in the future, but according to Mom, is doing great at this time. We are working with the family to plan for his return to school when he is ready. We just want to make sure that our staff and other folks are well aware of what they need to be able to do in case he has another situation at school. The family asks that you please continue to keep him in your thoughts. Somewhat connected to that, Vicki Etter, who was one of the staff highly involved in helping this student in the gym after his emergency, is this week's WNIC Teacher of the Week for those actions. And so congratulations to her. Some other student updates. Rachel Palado finished second in the bowling regional singles competition, and she has made Milan bowling program history by qualifying for the state meet for the third time in her high school career. Also, both the Milan girls and Milan boys bowling teams are headed to their state competitions after winning their regional championships. So congratulations to all of our bowlers. Staff, Val Rice, a Simon's teacher consultant, had a baby girl. Miriam Rice was born February 21st. Val and Miriam are both at home and are doing very well. Congratulations to our transportation department. They just earned another 100% pass rate on the annual state inspections. We are quickly approaching 25 years of 100% inspections. A huge thanks to our mechanics and truly the entire transportation department. I went over and met with the department, and one of the things that helps us is our drivers know their vehicles. And if you think about it, they drive their bus more than they drive their personal car when you look at hours per day. And they know their buses, and if they hear something that doesn't sound right or feel something that's not right, they get to the mechanic, and the mechanics can get it fixed. So truly a huge thanks to our entire transportation department, and a thank you to the board who has approved annual purchases of buses. That's an important part of providing safe transportation to our students. One grant update that Mr. McMahon's not involved in, Ms. Hendricks and I today attended a seminar on the student loan forgiveness grant. We are going to do our best to be able to offer this to our staff, but there are, as Ryan has told you with several of the grants, there are so many unknowns with this right now, and there just aren't answers. We ask the questions and they don't have answers. It's tied to the student loan forgiveness program, the federal program, but the problem is this one, we're the grantor, and so we have to verify that they qualify, and they have to meet like all the qualifications that they have to meet under the student loan forgiveness program. And so there are also questions of, is the money going to be taxable, and how many years is it going to go for? And there are just a lot of questions. This is something we want to do for our staff because it will help a portion of our staff out tremendously. It's up to $200 a month for 10 years. Which would be huge to some of our folks that have student debt. So we are doing our best to learn everything we can along with the rest of the state. The board did host a Big Red Chat on Tuesday, February 20th. I want to thank Mr. Farrow, Ms. Gutierrez, and Ms. Pryor for sharing information about school safety. And we also want to thank our community members who attended. I am going to add to Mrs. Powell's, we were honored to have Sherman Collins here, a member of the 1948 boys basketball state championship team. We were blessed to be able to present him with some recognition that night, and just truly an honor to have him here and represent that team. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Board member comments. All right, I just have a couple. Just the board self-assessment. So I just sent out an email that has the link to that. And so that's run through the Michigan Association of School Boards. It's a survey that goes through the self-evaluation for the board. So I would appreciate it if you folks could fill that out by Monday, March 11th, and then we can go from there once the results are received. Then the other thing was the workshops that they're hosting. One is called Building Belonging, which is exploring diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a transformative 2 workshop series designed to empower school board members in navigating the critical conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion within their districts. This series provides a structured and collaborative platform for governance teams to engage in this challenging dialogue. Empower your school board with the tools to build an inclusive future. So the coordinator of those workshops is on vacation right now, but once she returns, she'll get back to me and we'll work out some details. I'll ask her some questions and we'll figure out if that's something that we want to participate as a board going forward in regards to that initiative. So those are the comments that I have. Any other comments?
Mr. Sosa?
Yeah, Ms. Murray.
Just briefly want to thank you for looking into those workshops. I look forward to hearing more about them, and I think that they're going to be an important potential next step for us to take as a board in advancing that work. And then the only other thing briefly is I just want to thank Mr. McMahon for your presentation of the benchmark achievements this evening, and just a huge congratulations to all of our staff and students and administration. It's incredibly evident how much hard work is happening across all of our buildings, and our students are doing well. Not that I'm surprised, and just want to wish everyone a strong spring. This is the time of year where everybody starts to get a little bit empty in the tank. So just want to acknowledge that and celebrate all of the hard work that's happened so far. It's evident every time I'm in a building, every time I speak to a student. And yeah, so thank you and congrats. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Other comments? All right, next up on business is other old or new business, the MEA Level 4 grievance appeal. So I do want to thank those that are here this evening. As Ms. Murray stated, we do thank you for all the work that you guys do. The board received a grievance that's gone through the proper procedures, and we are to a Level 4. The appeal grounds right now is that the current collective bargaining agreement states that the employee, through payroll deduction, will contribute 20% of the illustrative rate towards health care. The employer is using the state hard cap for district contribution when the CBA language clearly shows an 80-20 arrangement. and this is found in the contract under Article 4, Section D1A. So the board will have a hearing in regards to that. So just so everybody's aware of how this will run, is that the MEA Grievance Committee will have 15 minutes to present, and then district administration will have 15 minutes to present. And then the board is welcome to ask questions of either side after we've heard their presentations. Are there any questions in regards to the hearing? All right. Mr. Brousseau.
I'm Jim Russo, president of...
Sorry. Push the green button.
I'm Jim Brousseau, president of the Milan Education Association, and these are my colleagues that are serving on the committee as well for this grievance. Please.
Jill Gerwick, representing the middle school.
And Kristen Cifaldi, representing Simons.
And Jesse Hoskins, representing the high school.
As was said, the current language in our collective bargaining agreement states that the employee, through payroll deduction, will contribute 20% of the illustrated rate towards health care. The district shall pay no more of the annual costs or illustrative rate, and then there's a bunch of examples of what that means, than is allowed under the Michigan Publicly Funded Health Insurance Contribution Act, MCL 15.561. That is commonly called PA 152, sorry. This has been the language, with the exception of the employee contribution numbers, since the collective bargaining contract for the 2015-16 school year. In the collective bargaining agreement in 2013-14 and 14-15, language included the term hard cap instead of the reference to Public Act 152. This was very clear. To look back now, it seems obvious. But that was changed in 2015. The term hard cap was deleted and instead referred to the district not paying more than the law allowed. Public Act 152 has two policies on how much publicly funded employers may contribute towards the cost of health insurance for employees. The first is what is commonly called the hard cap. This is an amount that changes every year and is the maximum amount a district can pay when averaged across employees who take health insurance from the district. The averaged part is significant. In other words, if the health care policies of one employee group individually require that the district pay more than allowed by the hard cap, the district can still comply with the law as long as the average cost of all employees taking health insurance is below the hard cap. The second policy is frequently called the 80-20 system. Under this system, regardless of the cost of health insurance, as long as the district pays no more than 80% of it, it's acceptable. When the current contract in 2021 was being negotiated, there was no mention of our employee contribution being potentially impacted by the hard cap. We spent a lot of time discussing the issue prior to the agreement because before this it was a 70-30 split, and that had been given because when the district was having financial difficulty back in the early 2010s. In the decade I have been bargaining contracts, I cannot remember a time when we had any discussion with the administration about the hard cap or checking to make sure we were below it. It was assumed that we were under the 80-20 rule, even though for most of the time the district paid 70% and the employee 30%. These numbers, as I said, were changed in this current contract to 80-20. The fact that the Board of Education never voted to go to the 80-20 policy is not under control of our union. Our contract clearly states the 80-20 split. In the Level 3 grievance disposition from Mr. Gerbaugh, he stated something to the effect that our contract states we won't require the district to break the law. And he states that enforcing our interpretation would require that the district do that. Section 15.564 of PA 152 states that the public employer may allocate the employee's share of total annual costs of the medical benefit plans among the employees of the public employer as it sees fit. This may be a solution to the problem that we're discussing tonight. All three of the other health care plan options that district employees have are under the cap, and therefore there's room for the plans for teachers that have gone over. Those amounts underneath the cap range from $553 a person to $2,950 a policy, and I don't know what the numbers are because that's not information our union has access to. In the future, if that solves the problem, the board will still have to take opportunity to change over to the 80-20 system for the following year if it chooses to take action. Mr. Gearbaugh's disposition suggested that fixing this problem for the current year is not possible. Yet after checking with others, the averaging option is likely to cover much, if not all, of the overage. It is possible that there are other avenues to address this problem that I'm not aware of, because until recently it hasn't been a concern because I didn't know it existed. We could be talking with other districts in the area to provide that needed information. In summary, our current contract language is very clear about the percentage the district and the employee will pay for health insurance. The language of the 13-14 contract contained the term hard cap, and it was very clear. Both parties agreed to remove that language and replace it with the current language. If the hard cap was to be used in determining the cost of employee health care insurance, the term should have remained in the language. The state law provides those two different maximums that can be used. Our language includes the percentages used in the second state policy, and its intent is clear. The Milan Education Association requests that you, the Board of Education, direct the district administration to stop the current practice regarding charges for employee health care insurance contributions, institute the bargain split of 80-20 for the entire rate, and make those employees whole who have been financially impacted by this issue. Thank you. I know we have more time, but unless you have questions, we would be done at this point.
Thank you. We'll ask questions afterwards.
Good.
Mr. Gearbaugh.
Good evening, Board. I am here to speak about the grievance. I've provided you a document, and the first thing in that document is the language out of the contract. I agree that that language does have two pieces to it, and it's important to understand that what employees pay can be very different than what we are doing to be compliant with the Michigan law. A lot of districts implement their own hard caps, or they use percentages, or they use dollar amounts. There are a lot of different ways that districts will denote what employees are going to pay towards their health insurance. That's very different than how that district chooses to be seen under the eyes of the state for the law. Under the law, districts can be viewed as two different ways, Section 3 or Section 4. Section 3 of the law is the default. So by not discussing it and not voting on it, the district would default to being a hard cap district. That's very different than being an 80-20 district, and that's different than being an 80-20 district in what staff are paying versus how we are recognized by the state of Michigan under this law. The next section that I want to talk about is the contract language history and how we got there. So if you go back to 2007 to 2010 contract, there is no discussion of employees making any contribution towards their health care costs. In 2010, 2011, we were aware that the state was starting to have conversations about possibly having employees pay a portion of their health care costs. So even before the law came out, we implemented a chart as to what our teachers would pay towards their health care costs. Again, that was pre the law. In 2011, 2012, again, pre-law, we created a different chart and included numbers for annual total for single, two-person, and full family insured educators. In 2012, 2013, when we were negotiating that contract, the law was now in place. And in that year, you can see that we included the language from the original hard caps. So that 5,500 plus 11,000 plus 15,000, those were the hard cap numbers in the original law. In 2013-14 and 2014-15, when we headed into 13-14 negotiations, we realized that those numbers were going to continuously change in the hard cap language. And so at the table, we agreed to just refer to it as the hard cap guidelines, because those numbers do change every year, and we didn't want to have to go back and change them every year because you had to wait until the state announced them. In 2015 and 16, I remember having a conversation at the table, and we talked about the fact that I remember the union coming and saying they didn't like hard cap guidelines because they didn't know what that referenced. Whose hard cap guidelines? There were a lot of questions about what that term could mean. And at that point, we agreed to reference the law. I agree with Mr. Brousseau that we never at the table since then have talked about being an 80-20 district. But I do remember at this time when we switched to the law, we made it very clear when we switched to this language of the law that we were still referencing the hard cap law. It's the default. The board had never voted to be 80-20, and therefore we were going to use the default hard cap portion of the language. That flowed from the year before, just trying to make it reference a law instead of it referencing a term in quotation marks, which could be misinterpreted. You'll also notice that when we negotiated the 13-14 contract, we went from employees paying 20% to employees paying 30%. That remained in the 15-16 contract. Then when you jump to the 16-17, 17-18, and 18-21 contracts, we were at 30%. We kept that language referencing the law. I put this in here more so because the language did change. There was one more sentence added because the law started to request that we had proof if they didn't take our insurance that they had other health insurance. That's when the Affordable Care Act started to come into play, and we had to make sure that we were living up to that expectation. In 21-24, I agree that we sat and we negotiated that the teachers would pay 20% of their health care. I also agree with Mr. Brousseau that we never discussed whether we were an 80-20 or a hard cap district in the eyes of the state. In my mind, that was because we had always been a hard cap district and they didn't bring that up at the table. Again, the history had been that we were hard cap. We had always been hard cap. There's two parts to that paragraph. There's the first sentence that lays out what the staff will pay, and that's changed from charts to 80-20 to 70-30 and back to 80-20. Then there's the second part of that paragraph that talks about how we will be seen in the eyes of the state. And I've provided you that history. The next section, Milan Area Schools has always been a hard cap district under MCL 15-561. Since the inception of the law, there has never been, in my mind, and remembering back to all of the negotiations, a discussion about being an 80-20 district under Section 4. We have always been a hard cap district under Section 3, which again is the default portion of the law. The history of the contract language, in my mind, clearly demonstrates a pattern of being a hard cap district since the inception of the law. The Milan Area Schools Board of Education has never voted to be an 80-20 district under Section 4 because we were a hard cap district under Section 3 and there was no need to do that. I also want to talk about the current contract language that we have with other Milan area school groups. The administrative handbook references that employees will pay 20%, but it still references the hard cap law because, again, there was no need to change it. They didn't have a concern about what that referenced. It wasn't discussed at the table that it should reference something that could be reviewed. And so that contract to date still remains hard cap guidelines. In the custodian and administrative assistant and paraprofessional contract, the custodian section still reads hard cap guidelines because they were fine with that language. The language in the administrative assistants references the law because they followed what the teachers did and they wanted to have it reference something that was easier to understand the reference to. I do want to talk about the legal references and ramifications because that is an important piece of this. Currently, the MEA contract states if there are any provisions of this agreement or any application of the agreement to any employee group or group of employees shall be found contrary to any of these laws or any other state or federal law, then such provision or application shall be deemed shall not be deemed valid and subsisting except to the extent permitted by law. So in other words, that contract language in the MEA contract states that the contract itself cannot direct the district to violate any state or federal law. Furthermore, MCL 15565 states that a collective bargaining agreement or other contract that's executed on or after September 27, 2011 shall not include terms that are inconsistent with the requirements of Section 3 and 4. Next, a district cannot use different compliance methods for different groups. For contract, and again, this is right out of the law, for contracts executed after September 27, 2011, districts must comply with Section 3 or Section 4 of MCL 15561. It does not allow you to have one group under 80-20 and a different group under hard cap because of the averaging piece. And again, if you want to look at the Department of Treasury's frequently asked questions on the law, Section 721 and Section 81, they clearly state that you cannot treat groups within the district differently. Next, a district cannot switch between Section 3 and 4 after the medical benefit year begins. For us, the medical benefit year begins January 1st. And this is the law, by a majority vote of the governing body each year, prior to the beginning of the medical benefit plan coverage year, a public employer may elect to comply with Section 4 for a medical benefit plan coverage year instead of the requirements in Section 3. Again, if you want to see the Treasury Department's frequently asked questions on this topic, Section 7.8 and Section 8.4, you will see that you cannot change after the first day of the medical year. Lastly, if you violate this law, there is a state aid penalty of 10% of the district's state aid, which for us would be approximately $2 million penalty if we violate this law. Again, the reasoning that I am asking you to deny this grievance is that we have been a hard cap district since the inception of the law. Yes, I agree, the language is a little bit ambiguous, but there are two pieces to that paragraph. The first sentence states what the teachers will pay, and that has changed numerous times over the years. And the second section states that we will follow the law. that language has evolved from being a hard cap district and specifically stating hard cap in the contract. Again, that language came out at the request of the union sitting at the table saying we want it to reference something that's more easily understood, not something in quotations. Could we have put the hard cap portion of that law? Yes, they didn't ask for that. I will state, I didn't think of that. But at that point, we were the default as a hard cap district. We discussed that at the table, and as Mr. Brousseau said, we have never discussed being an 80-20 district at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbob. All right, we'll start with questions for the MEA. Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
I guess I'm interested in why the language, the hard cap language was not requested by the union.
Red light's supposed to be on. There you go, yep.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you referenced language that was in previous contracts. And in the 21 contract, I'm curious why didn't the union ask for the language that they seem to be wanting to have after the fact?
Okay, I see where the misunderstanding is. We filed our grievance, and it was this long. The contract says 80-20. The district is not following the 80-20 split that the contract requires. That's our problem with it. All of the other stuff that I talked about are because Mr. Gearbaugh brought them up at the level 1 grievance hearing and the level 3 hearing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought that up, because I think the language is incredibly clear. And the idea of saying we wanted it to mean the same thing, but we changed the word and took out the key word, that concept, just is beyond my understanding. If you wanted it to mean the same thing, you should have kept it. I know it's being suggested that the union asked for it to be removed. I wasn't bargaining that year. I don't know what was said or what the reasoning was. Those people are no longer with the district.
Mr. Brousseau, doesn't your reading, though, negate the second part of the paragraph where it explicitly says that the district shall pay no more than what is allowed under the statute?
If you look and say, oh, we're a hard cap district, then yes, that would make sense. I had no reason to think we were a hard cap district.
But I guess my question to you is, isn't the fact that the language says we'll pay no more than is allowed under the district language that suggests that we are a hard cap district?
No, because the second option, I believe it's section 4, the 80-20 option, that is the maximum percentage that you can pay. You can't go above 80%. So section 3 has its maximum, which changes every year, and section 4 is 80%, you can't go over. And we were at 70% for a long time.
So I appreciate you acknowledging that it's not under the union's control to do the vote to go into 80-20. But I mean, do you have any evidence that the board did vote to be a 80-20 district?
No.
Okay.
Until this came up, I didn't realize that was even required.
Okay.
This was a non-issue until we were informed that we're paying this significant increase and that the hard cap was the reason. I've learned a lot since then.
Yeah, I think we all have. But as part of that learning, do you understand that if we do switch to an 80-20 district at this time, that would violate the law? Do you understand that?
Yes, I do. I also understand that the grievance was filed in December. We, at that time, if action had been taken, we wouldn't be here right now.
But actually, I mean, it was going through the grievance procedure.
But the district was made aware of what the problem was. We started the grievance process. We said our language says this. They knew you have to go through this process with the board voting. That could have taken place. We filed the grievance and had 2 meetings about it in December, yet the administration or the board chose not to act on it.
If you filed your grievance in December, when was the union made aware that the hard cap would be hit with the new rate increase?
November 28th, the day after open enrollment for health insurance started.
That's incorrect.
I can give you a copy of the email if you'd like.
I informed Mr. Brousseau.
Well,
Okay, I was informed it was going up. I asked for a copy of the rates. It didn't come. I left a phone message asking for a copy of the rates. Then I got the email on the 28th.
Can I go ahead?
yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Brousseau, some numbers that I was looking at, seems that the cap was hit for 2023 for the 2-person level of the rate by $37. Is that correct? And was that not identified in the 2023 year?
No, this is brand new information to me.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to be ridiculous, but this isn't our responsibility.
No, I'm not disagreeing
All
with you.
these laws are not the union's deal. We're having to talk about them and learn about them because things didn't happen the way they were supposed to.
We are learning with you, I agree. That's why I'm asking, I mean, that ends up being a small amount of money. That's $3 a month essentially. That's why I'm wondering if it just wasn't noticed at the time or.
Yeah, it was never brought up until the 28th or in the hallway when I was told they were going up. And then the 28th, I actually saw them.
Thank you.
But I mean, I understand, but it's, you do acknowledge that if we switch, it would be violating the law.
Yes.
Okay.
But I also, in my
I understand.
discussion, said there's an alternative to try to make this work. by
Yeah,
the
so I want to go to
average.
that. I guess what's the examples of the averaging? Because I'm not aware of that. I've not,
Okay.
yeah.
Um,
Because when I look at the law, it looks like I mean, it breaks it down and it doesn't, I don't see where there's this averaging part that you're talking about.
1 second.
Sure. Are other districts doing that? Do you know?
Mhm.
Do you
Yes,
have
they are.
examples?
On section 15.564, which is like the 4th page of the Public Act 152, it says the public employer may allocate the employee's share of total annual costs of the medical benefit plans among the employees of the public employer as it sees fit. So every group in our district, besides the teachers, administrators, and central office staff, are below the cap. So there's room to average. I don't know how much room is necessary because I don't know how many people have insurance policies. But some of them are very substantial gaps. So I would tend to think it won't be a problem. That will take care of this year's issue. We're negotiating again this year and we can fix it for next year. I'm hoping that will take care. If not, I know from union meetings that I hear about superintendents that do some really funky things to make the hard cap work without being ridiculous for the employees. And I can spend more time talking to them. It just never occurred to me that I needed to know it.
I'm sorry, could you give me that number again? I apologize.
The section number?
Yeah,
15.564, and that's PA 152.
okay, thank you.
Did you say 15.564?
Yeah. I have a copy here if it would help.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
So the other part, so if we do, if the board votes to makes the employees whole in regards to the grievance, and we're found to violate the law, potentially that exposes us to a $2 million fine from the state.
Right.
And
You would not want to do that.
right,
But there are, I'm suggesting that this remedy I just laid out, which I'm not sure why I had to bring it to you,
okay.
could take care of it. And I will be willing to help find out if there are other ways. We are not asking you to break the law. We are asking you to adhere to our contract.
So I want to go back to the contract then. So what is your position on the language of the contract? Do you think it's ambiguous or not?
Not at all. I think it was very clear when the word hard cap was included back 10 years ago, and I think it's very clear now. It's just that's not what
So,
the administration intended when they allowed it to be put in the contract. I believe that they didn't intend it to mean something different based on everything he told me, but the contract says what it says. And it did say something different, so if you didn't want that to be different, then don't change it. Or if you do change it, make it say the same thing, just a different way. That, the maximum does not, because there's two maximums. And it's on that same Public Act 152 about the maximums that you wrote down earlier.
other questions? Thank you, Mr. Brousseau.
Can I say
sure,
one more thing?
absolutely, yes.
It bothers me that if this isn't resolved at this meeting, that there's going to be additional legal expense. And I think that should be taken into consideration, that all options be considered before we start paying for a lawyer to do the arbitration and the unfair labor practice.
So what I'm hearing is you're willing to mediate in regards to this?
I'm willing to help find an answer. I'm not going to say to some teacher, you're only going to get 80% of your money back. I'm willing to help find ways to make that happen.
I guess because I'm under the assumption that you weren't interested in mediating this.
I am not interested in saying to any one of my members, sorry, I had to give up part of what your contract said you should have had. I'm not going to do that. So, but I'm willing to help make it work, because I don't expect the district to break the law. There can be an answer if people want there to be.
I guess it's the definition of mediation then,
Okay.
right? I mean, right, I guess that's what I'm trying to understand what the difference is, what you're saying to me versus mediation.
Because I'm not willing to say, okay, we'll take 75% of the amount it should have been. And so that is a non-negotiable. I'm willing to assist to find a way to make it happen so that the contract can be enforced.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? All right, questions for Mr. Gerbo?
Mr. Gearwell. I do have a question for you. In the 2021-24 contract language, is it possible that this has not been an issue in the past because the insurance premiums have increased significantly since the prior contract, 2018? All the prior contracts, I guess I just want to understand like where Mr. Brousseau is coming from. Basically, what I hear him saying is, you know, this hasn't been an issue, this hasn't been a problem, okay, and that's probably true. And the reason that that's probably true is because we didn't have insurance rates skyrocketing like we have currently. So is it possible that we just didn't, this wasn't a conversation piece because insurance premiums were not at that level that they are today?
Correct. From the initiation of this law until last insurance year, the employees paying 80% the employees paying 20% or paying 30% or paying the chart amounts always kept the district's portion under the cap.
Correct.
Because of our employees' health insurance experience over the last couple of years, we've received incredibly high insurance increases. And because of that, this year, the employees paying 20% doesn't keep the district's portion under the cap.
Thank you.
Mr. Gearwell, do you want to address the timeline issue as to when the union was aware that the rate, the illustrative rate would cause the 20% to go above, or the 80% to go above the cap?
Yes, and in hindsight, I wish I had put it in writing, but we do a lot of things in conversation here in Milan. I went up into the high school and asked Mr. Brousseau to chat for a minute. I informed him that we were going to have an issue this year because the 20% was not going to keep the district under the cap. I felt that it was something we should get together and talk about. I wanted to show him the rates. I wanted to discuss that. I said, please let me know when you might have time to talk, and I heard nothing.
I guess my question is, when did you have that conversation with
That was
Mr.
about 2 weeks prior to the rates going out to the staff I'd have to look at my calendar and see if I can figure out exactly what day, but it was about 2 weeks prior. During that time, I didn't get requested to meet. I didn't get asked for the rates. I didn't get asked for anything. The email went out to the staff for open enrollment. The day after that, I got asked for the rates, and he had them in less than 24 hours. I know that through the ULP, there are some comments that we changed the way that we create that document. Yeah, we added an additional column to the rates document because now the cap doesn't work, and we had to figure out a way to demonstrate what the staff would pay under the cap. So previously, we just had, here's the illustrative rate, that's your percentage, and it worked. When we got to this year, that wouldn't have worked because that wouldn't have kept us under the cap, so we did add a column. It wasn't we added the column because we were changing what we were doing. We added the column because the situation changed and we had to have a way to document it.
And do you have any comments on Mr. Brousseau's thought that there is a way to reallocate the illustrative rate to keep us under the cap?
Well, first I will say there is an averaging option. The law says that you may do that. I'm not against doing that. That's why the district offered to mediate the unfair labor practice, although the union did not offer to mediate the unfair labor practice. That's something that we could have talked about at the table during mediation. That's part of the reason the district offered. We would like to come up with a solution to this. I will also state there are not enough employees in the other groups that it would cover the entire cost of the difference between 20% and the cap.
Mr.
We've
Gearwell,
done some preliminary math on that. I haven't done final math, but there's not enough there to cover the entire amount.
And Mr. Gearwell, do you know offhand what the premium increases have been from year to year, like the last few years?
The percentages?
Yeah.
I don't know those off the top of my head.
I mean,
no.
but they've been high.
Yes,
I mean, I've addressed it at a few meetings.
yes.
Thank you.
I will also tell you, along those lines of the averaging, I've spoke with several other superintendents in the county and I only know of one district in the county that's 80-20. The rest all responded to me that they were hard cap districts. I can also tell you that I've talked with a couple of different major insurance providers, and most of them have said that districts that are hard cap don't get into averaging the hard cap, because the problem is if you average it and then you have a teacher or an employee that switches to something else and now that averaging doesn't hold, then you've got to change what you're charging your employees mid-year. But as a solution for this year, I would be willing to at least discuss that. But again, it will not cover the entire cost. But that's one of the reasons we were willing to mediate the unfair labor practice.
If we allocate it, does that mean that the cost for the other employees will go up as the teacher cost goes down?
No.
Or is it just a mathematical reallocation?
Basically, the way that it works, and Mr. Rousseau is right, there is a way to do averaging. And what you do is you can take the number of employees that in your district that are single and that are single insurance and multiply them by that dollar amount, and add that to the number of two-person families times that dollar amount, and add that to the number of full families times that dollar amount, and you get this number. The district can spend this much money. And you can spread that. So the spread would help some. The other employees, it's already set what they're paying. Our custodians right now are still paying 30%. They decided to get some of their funds back instead of going to 20% in salary. So they took it in hourly wages instead of, at the negotiation table, instead of dropping to 20%. So because they are spending 30%, they're well under they keep the district under the cap. So you'd have that space to then apply to other people that are over the cap. So it would not change to answer your question, it would not change what the other employee groups pay. You would just be using a little bit of their credit to help cover the deficit.
Just some same questions. Do you have any evidence that the board opted in to an 80-20 versus 80-20?
The board has never opted into 80-20 because we never were 80-20 and there was never a need to ask the board to do that.
And I guess and you acknowledge that if we switch now, it'd be a violation of the law?
Absolutely.
Mr. Sisto?
Yeah.
But the board could consider an 80-20 cap prior to the next negotiation time period frame, correct?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. I'm just saying now. I mean, it's based on the law. It's passed.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand now that there could be a penalty.
Before January 1st of next year, the board could decide to be 80-20 in the eyes of the state and start voting annually to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gearbow?
Yes.
Do you have an estimate of how much more this is collectively costing our staff this year? I did it per family, right? But collectively, how much is this costing our staff?
I haven't done the exact math, Krista. I did do a little bit of math, but I only had the breakdown of how many people were full family, and
Yeah.
if some of those full family people are custodians, then they don't play into it.
Right.
And I think, if I remember correctly, it was in the ballpark of $75,000 to $100,000.
Mr. Brussel, you don't have those figures because that's not, yep, I understand.
So in total, you think it's costing our employees, our teachers, between $75,000 and $100,000?
I think it's pretty close to that, yes.
Okay.
Do you think the contract language is ambiguous?
Not as it was discussed at the table, but if you just read it not knowing what was said at the table, I can see how they would, when they negotiated, when we sat at the table at the first discussion of this grievance, it was stated to me that we never talked about being an 80-20 district at the table for this 3-year contract. That they assumed that because they negotiated to pay 20%, that we were automatically an 80-20 district in the eyes of the state. I didn't assume that because I knew we were a hard cap district and we'd always had been. You know, to me, the language could have been a little bit less ambiguous if it had said, if that second sentence started with, except that, right, the district won't, and we could say section 3 of the law. Back when we negotiated that, in the first time we switched to the language referencing the law, we didn't feel we needed to do that because we knew we were a hard cap district. Both sides knew that. We talked about it at the table, and so we just referenced the law.
Do you know what percentage of our teachers take our insurance?
I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And again, remember right now, the single insurance families aren't affected by this. It's just the 2-person and the full family. And I will say, I'm also affected by it, as are all the administrators. We're all paying the higher rate as well.
Mr. Gearbob, if there were a way to make these teachers whole outside of reverting to an 80-20, that would be certainly much less than a $2 million penalty, it sounds like. Would doing something creative, perhaps to use Mr. Brewster's words, violate the law as you see it?
I would have to check with our legal counsel. What I'm hearing you say is there a way that we could continue with employees paying this portion and somehow we give them money somewhere else? I would have to check with our legal counsel and see if that's legal.
I don't know, that's why I'm throwing it out there.
Again, I'm not necessarily against that, but when we ask to mediate the unfair labor practice, the other side doesn't want to mediate.
And in order to do that, we have to reopen the contract.
Or sign a letter of agreement. We could come up with something.
Any other questions?
One more, and just to be clear, that would only affect this current year because it's the only year for which we've exceeded the hard cap and we will be going into negotiations for next year.
Correct.
Correct.
Could the letter of agreement also make clear that we are a hard cap district?
You can have a letter of agreement, say whatever you want to have it say if both sides agree to it.
Thank you. I have one more question. The letter of agreement, that would have to be ratified by the entire union?
That's a question for them. On our side, it would have to be ratified by the board.
And Jim, you have no idea what percentage of your membership take the health insurance?
Well, I didn't want to shout out.
I appreciate that, and I'm probably breaking the rules at this point.
Historically, during negotiations, it's almost always 2/3 of the teachers take health insurance, or real close to that. But some of those are single, and therefore they're not affected. So,
That's a pretty ballpark, yeah. I'd say it's about right. I agree with him.
Mr. Gearbob,
Yes.
if we remain a hard cap district, you would agree that we're probably going to go over the cap, correct? In the next year?
I honestly can't tell you that because there are so many factors. What I can tell you that is so far, your experience rating is based on multiple years, and we have had a little bit better year, so our rates might not see the level of increase that we saw in the past. What I don't know is what's the CPI index for healthcare costs that they base the increase in the hard cap off of. How much is that going to go up? I mean, what's happened every year is they've gone up and we've gone up, but we've always gone up enough that it doesn't hit the hard cap number.
But premiums are up, our loss history is up. It's like,
I mean, yes, honestly, there is the possibility that we could see a 0% increase next year and still not meet the hard cap with 20%. I mean, that's just a possibility depending on how much the hard cap goes up.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. The board will be discussing this further later in the meeting. Just so folks know that I will be abstaining from the vote due to a conflict of interest. And others will also. But at this time, I need a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 81H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act for the purpose of attorney-client privilege communication.
Moved by Heike.
Support by Rosenleacher.
So moved and supported to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 81H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act for the purpose of attorney-client privilege communication. Is there any discussion? So when we return from that, there is still business before the board, just so folks know, but Ms. Heike?
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
motion carries 7-0.
Right, we're going into closed session at 8:11 PM. All right, we're returning to open session at 8:35 PM. All right, I'll entertain a motion regarding the MEA Level 4 grievance appeal.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenleacher.
I move that the board deny the Level 4 grievance for the reasons stated by the superintendent during his presentation at this evening's meeting and in his Level 3 grievance decision, and authorize the board president to send written notice of the board's decision to the parties pursuant to Article 11 of the master agreement within 10 workdays from today's date.
Support by Pharaoh.
Right, it's been moved and supported that the board deny the Level 4 grievance for the reasons stated by the superintendent during his presentation at this evening's meeting and his Level 3 grievance decision, and authorize the board president to send written notice of the board's decision to the parties pursuant to Article 11 of the master agreement within 10 workdays from today's date. Discussion.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Heike.
I want to publicly announce that I will be abstaining from the vote based on a personal conflict of interest. But I do want to say a couple of things. One, I want us, well, I'm going to acknowledge the hardship that this increase in the portion of the premium or the illustrative rate causes our teachers. I don't want anyone to think that that has been lost on me. And I understand that. I also want to say that I think that there very well may be a solution. But unfortunately, through the appeal of the grievance to the board, this is not the forum within which we can find that solution. The forum to find that solution is through mediation. And so I highly encourage both parties to come to the table with a mediator and find that solution, because I think there's one out there. And as a board member, I am willing to support a reasonable solution that keeps us within the statute and finds the relief and is within the contractual language. I'm willing to entertain that solution, but we can't negotiate that solution here at a board meeting through a grievance appeal. And so please get together, sit at a table with a mediator and find it.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
I just want to echo what Ms. Heike said. I agree. I think there's room for both groups to reach a solution. And I would encourage both groups to try to do that. So, thank you.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Rosenleacher.
I agree. I was encouraged by both parties during their presentation that I think that there's a desire to have a solution here. And echoing what Ms. Heike said, we can't come to that solution here at the board table this evening. So please sit down together and let's figure this out, because it matters and all of the people here matter. So Thank you.
Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Gutierrez.
I also want to echo that. I was really encouraged tonight hearing willingness on both sides, frankly, to have realistic, creative conversations to find reasonable solutions to this issue. And in fact, I commend the MEA for bringing some of those ideas forth. And I really, really support and encourage both sides of this to really come to a conversation where we can achieve a solution before we get to arbitration, before we get to financial penalties, because none of us want to do that. Anything like that would cause financial impact to our district, and that's not something either of us want. We're a small, close-knit community, and we want to find solutions that are collaboratively reached and in the betterment of all of us. What we heard from MEA tonight was a real possible starting point of those options, and I really appreciate that conversation. And I encourage MEA to exercise the option to consider mediation before moving forward with arbitration. As Mrs. Heika, Mr. Farrow, Mrs. Rosenleacher said, that is not in the board's purview to be able to do here tonight. But I think based upon what we heard from both sides, there was a very reasonable approach to thinking through what a reasonable solution might be for this year before we enter into negotiation. And I would fully encourage and support that option before moving forward.
Others? All right. Yeah, this was a difficult one, and I think as Mr. Brousseau, there's a lot of learning. So I would encourage this conversation. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be difficult. I understand that it will be. There's a solution, but I think there's going to be there's got to be some good discussion in regards to that. I don't think it's going to be a solution that everybody's the most happy with. That's part of coming together with a compromise. So with that, any other comments? Yes,
Mr.
Ms. Murray.
Sisler.
Yeah.
I just wanted to state that I also will be abstaining from the vote due to a conflict of interest.
All right. Any other questions or concerns? All right, it's been moved that the board deny the level 4 grievance for the reasons stated by the superintendent during the presentation at this evening's meeting and in his level 3 grievance decision, and authorize the board president to send written notice of the board's decision to the parties pursuant to Article 11 of the master agreement within 10 workdays from today's date. Ms. Heika?
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes. Or, I'm sorry, I abstain. I just said I'm going to, I
So
abstain.
close.
I
You're so
abstain due to a personal conflict.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heika, I'll be abstaining due to a personal conflict of interest. Murray,
Abstain due to conflict of interest.
Pryor,
Yes.
motion carries 4, do I say 4-0 with 3 abstentions?
All right. You're excused. Unless you want to stay. I mean,
We're about to go back into closed session, so. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
all right. Next up on the agenda, I need a motion to appoint Attorney Rob Dietzel of Troon Law Firm PC to serve as the reinstatement official for the student reinstatement process.
Moved by Heika.
Support by Murray.
It's been moved and supported to appoint Attorney Rob Dietzel of Troon Law Firm PC to serve as the reinstatement official for the student reinstatement process. Ms. Heika?
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heika, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next up, I need a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 81B of the Michigan Open Meetings Act and upon request of the student's parent guardian for the purpose of considering a reinstatement petition for a student whose identity is known to the board as student 2022-2023-10.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Heika.
It's been moved and supported to enter into closed session for the purpose of considering a reinstatement petition for a student whose identity is known to the board as student 2022-2023-10. Any discussion? Just so everyone's aware, the only order of business after this will be the disposition on the reinstatement decision, and then adjournment. So, Ms. Heike?
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, we are going into closed session at 8:44. We're returning to open session at 10:29 PM. Mr. Dietzel, we will offer a resolution in regards to the student reinstatement.
As is typical, the board thought deliberately and carefully about all of the information that was presented. These are never easy decisions, and this board never takes them lightly, which I very much appreciate. No decision has been made yet, but I did try to capture the discussion of the board into a proposed resolution. This resolution is for discussion only. If a board member wishes to move the resolution, they may. If it's seconded, then it would fall under the typical process where we would offer discussion, take a roll call vote. If it's not moved, it will die and we'll have continued discussion. So the resolution states, on December 21, 2022, the board expelled a student whose identity is known to the board as 22-23-10 for engaging in sexual harassment toward other district students in violation of Board Policy 2026. On January 30th, 2024, pursuant to the expulsion resolution and district policy, the district received a petition for the student's reinstatement. Pursuant to board policy, a committee to review the reinstatement petition was created. The committee was comprised of 2 board members, 1 school administrator, 1 school staff member, and 1 parent. The committee considered the reinstatement petition and information provided to it by the student's family and by the superintendent. Following its review, the committee made a recommendation to the board. The committee's recommendation was based on consideration of each of the 7 factors identified in sections 1311A5E of the revised school code and each of the expectations detailed in the expulsion resolution. At the request of the student's parent and as authorized by the Michigan Open Meetings Act, section 8(1)B, the reinstatement review was conducted in a closed session meeting of the board. The board thoroughly reviewed and deliberated upon the committee's recommendation and independently reviewed and deliberated upon all of the information provided to the committee and to the board. Now therefore be it resolved that, based on careful consideration of the 7 factors identified in section 1311A5E of the revised school code and the expectations detailed in the expulsion resolution, the student's petition for reinstatement is denied. The student may petition the board again for reinstatement no sooner than July 15th, 2024, for reinstatement no sooner than the start of the 24-25 school year. Before reinstatement, the student must, 1, demonstrate to the satisfaction of the board that he is actively participating in an appropriate counseling program approved by the superintendent that includes regular, individual, one-on-one counseling with a licensed mental health counselor or therapist, or written proof from a licensed mental health counselor or therapist that he has met his therapeutic goals, which must include 1, addressing his trauma from the September 2022 event, and 2, being able to process and understand his role in the events leading to his expulsion. Also, that he established that he has not engaged in conduct during the period of expulsion that may be viewed by the board as detrimental to the student's continued education at the district. That he demonstrate to the satisfaction of the board that the student received educational instruction and cooperatively participated in an educational program during the period of expulsion, which may include online or virtual educational program offered by the district, and that the student propose a restorative practice acceptable to the board that would repair the harm to the school community caused by the behavior leading to the expulsion. All documentation establishing that these conditions were satisfied must be included with the reinstatement petition. The board will consider the reinstatement petition directly and directs the superintendent not to refer the petition to a committee. If a petition is timely filed, the board will consider the petition at a meeting before the start of the 24-25 school year. During the time of the expulsion, the student may not be on school grounds or attend any functions at the district without prior written approval from an appropriate administrator. The student may attend the Washtenaw Alliance for Virtual Education WAVE program through Milan area schools during the time of expulsion if accepted for participation by the WAVE program. Nothing in this paragraph may be construed to authorize the student to be present on school grounds or attend district activities or events. Consistent with Section 11A and 1311.1 of the School Code, the Board finds that the school's interests and mission are served by this resolution. Administration is directed and authorized to implement the terms of this resolution and delegated the authority to do so, and any resolution or part of a resolution that conflicts with this resolution is hereby rescinded.
All right, I need a motion to deny reinstatement to student 2022-2023-10 in accordance with the resolution as read by Rob Dietzel.
Moved by Heike.
Support by Farrell.
It's been moved and supported to deny reinstatement to student 2022-2023-10 in accordance with the attached resolution as read by Rob Dietzel. Is there any further discussion? All right, it's been moved and supported to deny reinstatement to student 2022-2023-10 in accordance with the attached resolution as read by Rob Dietzel. Ms. Heike.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray.
Yes.
Pryor.
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes,
Farrow.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
the meeting is adjourned at 10:34.